IAS 38, intangible assets. First of all, the definition of intangible asset, it's a separately identifiable non-monetary asset without physical substance. Separately identifiable means this asset is separable from other assets of the organization. Non-monetary means this is not a financial instrument, this is not cash, not bank deposit, not cash equivalent, not other type of financial instrument. Now, we were talking about some examples of intangible assets. Here we have plenty of examples of intangible asset, like patent protected invention, then music. You can have copyright of music, you can have copyright of books, those are your intangible asset. Movie, those are also copyright protected. License, brand name, software, computer software, that is games, other kind of computer software like accounting software, goodwill of an organization, etc. Out of all these intangible assets, goodwill is very exceptional because goodwill may not be separately identifiable from other assets of the organization. We have a separate IFRS, which is IFRS 3, business combination. Under IFRS 3, we recognize goodwill. An intangible asset is separately identifiable if it is purchased separately, or if it is obtained separately under a contractual or legal right, if it can be sold separately, or it can be leased separately, or it can be transferred separately, then this is separately identifiable. If any one of these conditions is met, then it is separately identifiable. Just one condition needs to be met out of all this. Unrecognizable internally generated intangibles. There are some intangible assets, those cannot be capitalized if those are internally generated. Here we have some list like goodwill, brand, research expense, customer list, masthead, etc. However, if you buy brand from external source, or if you buy research from external source, you definitely can recognize that intangible asset. Goodwill, your own goodwill cannot be recognized. However, in business combination, goodwill of subsidiary can be recognized. Can be recognized in consolidated statement. IFRS 3. When you acquire subsidiary, you also acquire the goodwill of subsidiary, and that goodwill can be recognized in the consolidated statement. Now, some expenses, sometimes students become confused whether these expenses create valid intangible assets or not. Now, IAS 38 says this kind of expenses do not create valid intangible assets, so these cannot be recognized as intangible asset, like a startup cost. When a business is started, for the first several years, you may spend a lot of money. You may incur some loss also. Some of the companies argue that this should be capitalized as intangible asset, like Shonali Bank tried to do that, but this is disallowed. You cannot do that. Advertisement cost, marketing cost, or your own brand cannot be recognized as intangible asset. Business relocation cost cannot be recognized as intangible asset. Similarly, employee training cost cannot be recognized as an intangible asset. You cannot recognize your employees as intangible asset. Though employees are valuable, trained employees are capable of generating value, they can bring future inflow of economic benefit, but still you cannot recognize your employees as intangible asset. Neither you can recognize them as biological asset, and definitely you cannot recognize them as other asset also.
So I have a question.
Yes, what is your question, Hasib Ahmed?
So related to last slide that
Yeah.
if we bought a software from outside,
Yes.
not internally generated, so the cost is total maybe you can say 10 million BDT.
Hmm.
So there is 9.5 million is related to the software and zero point 0.5 million is related to the employee training cost.
Right.
So if you want to capitalize as intangible asset of this software, then what should we do? Only 9.5.
Capitalize $9.5 million and $0.5 million is expensed. This $0.5 million cannot be capitalized.
So this training cost is specifically related to this software. So if we want to use this software, my employee
Needs to be trained up. Your employees do not have the necessary skill to operate the software, so your employees need to be trained up. I understand that, but still, no argument can make it valid. Okay, it is disallowed, it is disallowed. You can have different types of arguments, but no argument can make it valid. It is disallowed.
And another question is,
Yes.
what is masthead?
Sorry, masthead.
Yeah, masthead is
Masthead
ship.
actually is a
Thing.
title right. A title
Oh,
right, so you can place your company's title with the name of any program or any publication, etc. Like close up, mm, fashion show maybe,
okay.
or close up Tomakei Kuche Bangladesh or something like that. Yeah. Then American Idol, Bangladeshi Idol, you can say close up Bangladesh Idol, like that. Lux Bishwa Shunduri, yes.
And another question is related to the internally generated asset. That is
Intangible
that
asset, yes.
if we have a professional software guy, they can build any software for my company. For example, that can be capitalized or not.
Yes. Internally developed.
So in that basis, the cost of employee should be charges.
Yes. This is capitalized as intangible asset. And all direct costs of developing the software as well as the production overhead should be capitalized. So programmers will work to develop the software and some people will oversight development of software. All this related cost will be capitalized as part of software value. So this kind of internally generated intangible asset we do not have any objection with. We have objection with certain type of internally generated intangible asset like goodwill, brand, etc. But software, no problem. You create a music in-house, no problem. You create a movie in-house, no problem. You can capitalize these intangible assets. Okay? I hope that clears it. Now let's move on to our next topic, that is recognition criteria for intangible assets. First of all, it must meet the definition, otherwise you cannot recognize it. So what is the definition once again? Intangible asset is a separately identifiable non-monetary item without any physical substance. Apart from that, entity must have to have present control over the item arising from past event. Present control is absolutely necessary. Once again, what is control? Maybe Mubarak Hussain, can you tell me what is control? Give me the definition of control. Mubarak. Here we have control.
একদম ডিফাইন না, বাট লিগাল লিগাল
No, 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 no. We don't care about legal things. We are not lawyers. We are accountants. Someone else? Asif, can you give me a definition of control from lesson 1? Conceptual framework.
Me,
Yeah. So it's the ability for an entity to receive economic benefits.
Thank you very much. That is the first thing. Power to receive economic benefit.
Yep.
And then?
The power to relocate, modify, and all the other benefits that comes with.
No, you are saying power to modify, relocate, etc. We actually do not care that much about modification or relocation. We care about the power to direct the use of the asset. Power to direct the use of the asset. Or sometimes, if you directly do not have the power to direct the use of the asset, then we can make another test, that is, do you have the power to prevent others from using that asset or not? If you have that kind of power, you can prevent others from using that asset, then we will conclude, yes, you have control over the asset. So we need a present control, and then it must be probable that future economic benefit will flow to the entity, future inflow of economic benefit. And finally, cost of the asset should be reliably measurable. Cost of the asset should be reliably measurable. So these are the criteria of recognition. If these criteria are not met, then we cannot capitalize intangible asset. However, we will have additional criteria for development expenditure. We will check that a little bit later. But before that, let me take the question of Maqsudur Robin. Robin, you had a question.
স্যার বলছিলাম যে মানে কন্ট্রোলের ক্ষেত্রে মানে রিস্ক এন্ড রিওয়ার্ড যে পাচ্ছে ধরা যাবে ওনার কন্ট্রোলে আছে
Maqsudur Robin said, can we decide control based on risk and reward or not? Definitely we are deciding control based on the reward, economic benefit, power to receive economic benefit. But the framework does not directly talk about the risk. Does not directly talk about the risk. But indirectly, yes, you can say risk is associated with control. When you have control, you get the reward of the asset, and that may mean that you also bear the risk. Sorry. Next one.
Question below, sir.
Yes, what is your question? Tanvir Asif.
Internally generated ERP software.
Yes.
এই ক্ষেত্রে কি হচ্ছে like where you pay a subscription rather than purchasing it, but the software is highly specialized to suit just your organization's needs, but you still don't own it. You have to pay a monthly subscription for it.
Right.
In that case, who controls the power? The third party who provides the software, or the organization who paid substantial amount of money to set it up?
Yes, you control your copy of the software, and you receive benefit from your copy of the software, and this is under a leasing agreement. Okay, under a leasing agreement. So you can recognize that as an asset, no problem.
But
স্যার
এখানে
ওনার
তো,
কোশ্চেনটা
মানে
শুনতে পারিনি আমরা, মানে বোঝা যাচ্ছে না।
Oh, the question was
broken.
like when we do not buy the software or software code, we actually buy the software, means we get a permission to use the software, use the intangible asset. Okay, we get a permission to use the intangible asset, a copy of intangible asset. Whether we should recognize this as an asset or not, the answer is yes, we should recognize that copy as an asset, because that copy is separately identifiable, this is separately purchased, then we have power to direct the use of that copy. We do not need to have power to direct the use of the whole code base, because the whole code base has substantially higher value. My copy has substantially lower value, of course. Okay, the whole code base can be sold or leased out to many people, and then we can direct the use of our copy and we can obtain benefit from our copy. Future inflow of economic benefit will flow to us, and of course we can reliably measure the cost. So the criteria of recognition are met, and therefore we will recognize it as an intangible asset. Okay, that was the
But
question of
what
the
about
bit.
what about the ongoing subscription cost that you still have to pay on a monthly basis? What about that cost?
Yeah, when we need to pay the cost in installment, we need to calculate present value. We need to calculate present value. Okay, present value of the future outflows, and that is the cost. It is not necessary that you must pay cash at the time of obtaining a copy of the software. You can purchase it on installment, you can take it or obtain it under monthly installment basis, annual installment basis, doesn't matter. You need to just calculate the present value. You got that, hopefully. And later we will cover IFRS 16. Over there you will understand it more in more details.
Okay, gotcha.
Next, IAS 38 has few recognition criteria, out of which one recognition criteria says that it must be probable that there will be future inflow of economic benefit to the entity. Future inflow of economic benefit. This criteria is required for internally generated intangible asset. Internal assets. For the assets that we purchase, externally acquire, we assume that this criteria is fulfilled. So we do not need to make a test for this criteria, whether there will be inflow of economic benefit or not. We say we purchased it for a cost because there will be some benefit. So there is an automatic assumption that this particular criteria is fulfilled, and so we do not need to test it or prove it for acquired intangible asset. However, for internally generated intangible asset, we must prove it based on reasonable and supportable assumptions about the conditions which will exist over the life of the asset. For what type of intangible assets? Internally generated intangible assets. Like this. If I have this license, then I will be, this is my assumption, I will be provide a service to my customer. Right. and I will be able to provide the service to my customer as long as I have the license. It's like that. This kind of assumption we need to make, and the assumption needs to be reasonable and supportable. When it becomes supportable, if I can bring an example from another company, then my assumptions are much more supportable. Auditor cannot complain. Okay. Otherwise, there can be a little bit question. Sometimes, if there is no external examples that we can provide, we need to come to an agreement. If two or more independent people come to the same conclusion or same assumption regarding an item, then we say that the information is verifiable or supportable. Like you are saying the asset will provide you benefit for 5 years, and auditor is also saying that that this is reasonable, that the asset will provide you benefit for 5 years. So both of you came to the same conclusion. In that case, it is supportable. It is taken as supportable. No problem. Next one. Goodwill. Now, goodwill is a special type of intangible asset. It may not meet the definition of IAS 38 intangible asset, because IAS 38 intangible asset are separable, separately identifiable, and goodwill may not be separately identifiable. However, this is an intangible asset which is recognized under IFRS 3. We follow IFRS 3 for the recognition of this intangible asset, business combination. You cannot recognize your own goodwill. However, in the consolidated statement, subsidiaries' goodwill can be recognized. Remember that. Here is how you calculate goodwill. You take the acquisition consideration. That means how much you paid to acquire control over the subsidiary company. Then you take fair value of NCI, that is non-controlling interest, or value of NCI. Sometimes it is measured at fair value, sometimes it is not measured at fair value. We are not going to discuss IFRS 3 today, but just general idea. Value of NCI. NCI means non-controlling interest. Think about a subsidiary company. You have acquired majority shares, 60% acquired, and rest of the 40% shares belong to someone else, some other parties. And this 40% share is called NCI, non-controlling interest. 60% is controlling interest. You have acquired controlling interest, and 40% is non-controlling interest. Then we deduct fair value of net asset of acquiree, means subsidiary, on the acquisition date to calculate goodwill. We have very simple worked example over here. Here is the worked example. B agrees to pay $61,000 for 100% of the business, but values the net asset at only $38,000. So the goodwill of B's in B's book will be 61,000, that is the acquisition consideration, minus 38,000, that is the net asset value, equals to 23,000. Notice there is no NCI because we have acquired, or B has acquired, 100% of the net assets. Now we have some simple questions to get the formula across. Peggy buys Phil's business for $30,000. That is the acquisition consideration. The business assets are a bar valued at $20,000. inventories $3,000, and receivables another $3,000. How much is goodwill valued at? That's our question. Now, anyone can give me the answer? How about Baki Billah? Baki Billah?
7.
Thank you very much. 7,000, right? Or no, it's not 7,000.
23. Oh, receivable 26. 4,000.
4,000. Thank you very much. So 30,000 is the cost, and acquired asset fair value is 20 plus 3 plus another 3. 26. So goodwill 4,000. Question 2. C agrees to pay 70,000 for 60% of the D. That means 40% shares belong to non-controlling interest. Fair value of remaining 40% is expected to be 42,000 on the acquisition date. Fair value of net asset of D on the acquisition date is 100,000. Calculate the goodwill. Masood Bhuya, can you give me the answer to this question?
Sir, is it 52,000 US dollar?
No, not 52,000.
Sir, as his net asset is 1 lakh and fair value is 42,000. So remaining should be the goodwill, as I understand.
No. Read the question carefully. Robin, yes, you want to give me an answer, right?
Yeah, I think goodwill should be $12,000.
Thank you very much. How did you calculate? We need to take the cost of
Yes.
acquisition, that is 70. Then we need to take the NCI value, that is 42. Together 112 minus
12,000
net asset.
net asset 100K.
Yes. We have 12,000 goodwill. Thank you very much, Robin. You are correct. Now, negative goodwill. What is the concept of negative goodwill? Sometimes you buy an asset with higher value by paying a lower cost. And in such case, there is negative goodwill. If you calculate goodwill, the goodwill figure will be negative. It is not a good reputation. You can say it's a bad reputation, and therefore you can buy the asset at a lower price or lower value. Here we have an example. N acquired 100% of G for $50,000. That is the cost. And on that date, fair value of net assets of G is measured to be $56,000. This is the value that you have acquired. So you paid lower cost than whatever you have acquired, 6,000 lower. So this time you will have a negative goodwill of $6,000. This negative goodwill can arise because of an error. So first of all, we need to figure out whether there is an error or not. How do we figure that out? We need to re-estimate this acquisition cost, re-estimate this fair value of net asset. If there is any NCI, we need to re-estimate that. We need to redo the calculation to find out whether there is an error or not. Why this is necessary? Because negative goodwill is abnormal. This is very rare. So whenever negative goodwill arises, figure that out whether this is because of error or not. Try to identify error and try to correct the error. After correcting any error, if you see that still you have negative goodwill, then you will say it came from a bargain purchase, right? In negotiation, you somehow own. So this is your profit or gain, and that profit will be recognized in profit or loss immediately. This is how you recognize negative goodwill. Okay. Goodwill debit and gain on bargain purchase, that is credit. That was goodwill. Now we will talk about research and development. So in this section we have
Sir,
two parts.
গুডউইলের জার্নালটা একটু বলবেন? জার্নাল যেটা দেখালেন মানে
This is for negative goodwill.
নেগেটিভটা।
Yes.
তাহলে ব্যালেন্স শিটে কি আমি মানে ওইটাকে কিভাবে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করব?
In a statement of financial position, you will have zero goodwill. You will have zero goodwill. Say for example, you had this goodwill. Come on. That was your goodwill balance, yeah? Then you have recognized this journal, goodwill debit 6,000. Means you add 6,000 over there. So this account balance becomes zero for a statement of financial position. And you show 6,000 in the profit or loss as gain.
ওকে, মানে ব্যালেন্স শিটে কি নেগেটিভটাই যাবে?
It will become zero. Once again, goodwill will become zero. You had a negative goodwill, then you have to debit the goodwill account. You have debited goodwill account.
ওকে,
Come to this question, you had a negative goodwill 6,000. Then you have debited goodwill account, means you have added plus 6,000. So your goodwill balance became zero for the statement of financial position. You understand that?
ওকে।
Okay. Now research and development. We have two parts. The first part would be research, and then we will talk about development expenditure. Research. This is the first step of doing something new. Inventing something or launching a new product, etc. This is the first step. Research includes search for new knowledge, search for alternative method or material to be used. You do not have a choice yet. You are thinking about the possibilities. Analysis or evaluation to understand nature or result of something. If you analyze, that is also part of research. The formulation, design, evaluation, and final selection of possible improved material, device, products, process, system, or service, etc. Go to the market, collect information. This is research. Try to find out alternative material. Up to making the decision, the phase will be research. Try to think about a design of latest iPhone. Before making the decision, up to making the decision, everything will be a research phase, whether I should use 12 megapixel camera or 50 megapixel camera, whether I should use 3 cameras or 5 cameras, etc. These are research. Okay, as long as we are dealing with possible alternatives, it will be research. When we make a choice, we make a selection, and then we do further work on that, then it becomes development. So for example, I have decided that in my latest iPhone design, we will use 50 megapixel camera and there will be 4 cameras. Decision is made. Now we need to do some experiment. We need to develop some cameras. We need to test the product. We need to come up with the design of the product. All those things will be development phase. And search means very preliminary stage. Search, analysis, those are very preliminary stages, of course. Now come to development expenditure. These are incurred at a later stage of a project. Okay, and at this point sometimes the success or failure of the project becomes apparent, whether we can do that or whether we can't do that, right? So here we have examples of development expenditures: design, construction and testing of pre-production or pre-use prototype. Prototype, alternatively we can call those samples. Design of tools and molds involving new technology. We have selected a technology already. Selected technology. But if I say we are thinking whether this technology will be better or that technology will be better, then it will be still a research phase. The design, construction and operation of a pilot plant that is not of a scale economically feasible for commercial production. Pilot plant, once again, means test plant, test factory, small in size. It will produce maybe 100 units only for the testing purpose. The design, construction and testing of chosen alternative for new or improved materials, devices, products, processes, systems or services. Chosen. We have already made a decision, some sort of decision. But if we go back over there, we are still talking about improved material, device, product, process, system, service. Up to selection, it will be research. And after selection, if we do additional work and spend additional money, that will become development expenditure. And after development, there will be commercial production, hopefully. Now, research expenditure, if I talk about that, research expenditure cannot be capitalized if it is internal research expenditure. Yes, external research expenditure can be capitalized. If you buy research from someone else, you can capitalize that. But your own research, that cannot be capitalized. Now, development expenditure must be capitalized if certain criteria are met. We have a few criteria and all of these criteria must be met. First criteria, the project must have to have technical feasibility. So what is a technical feasibility? Technical feasibility means based on calculation or based on scientific theory, you can say, it is possible, it is not impossible. Right? That means technology exists. Technologically or mathematically or scientifically, it is possible. You need to talk to a scientist or engineer to understand whether this is technically feasible or not. Think about SpaceX. SpaceX. They want to send rocket to Mars. Now someone please tell me, who will tell me? Mubarak Hussain, you're familiar with SpaceX and their mission Mars?
Hello?
Yes, I'm listening to you. You're
Yes.
familiar with SpaceX and mission
Yes.
Mars? Oh, very good. Then you tell me whether that is technically feasible or not. What do you understand when we say technical feasibility?
I think yes,
Yes, it is technically
feasible.
feasible, right? Based on mathematics or based on engineering theory, it is possible. What is technical feasibility? You explain us.
এটা ঠিক এক্সপ্লেইন করতে পারছি না।
Based
But
on
অন্য এইগুলাতেও তো গেছে ওরকম।
right, exactly. We sent people to moon, right? And we sent people to satellite stations, and now technical feasibility will mean it is possible based on current mathematics or current technology, current scientific theories, etc. It is not impossible. Okay, that is technical feasibility. Now the second criteria is that the entity has planned to complete the development. We want to finish it. And then third criteria will be entity has capability to complete the development. Capability to complete the development. So capability means it has access to resources like financial resource, technological resource, other resource, human power, say for example, so that you can complete the development. If you do not have adequate technical resource, maybe you will not be able to do it. If you do not have engineers, you will not be able to do it. If you do not have money, you will not be able to do it. If you do not have other type of resources, you are unable to do it. So you must have to have access to those things. Then you can say we are capable to complete the development. And the next criteria, after development, there will be something that we will be able to use or we will be able to sell. As a result, we will be able to receive future inflow of economic benefit. We will receive some sort of benefit. That is very important. Otherwise, it doesn't meet definition of asset. And finally, cost needs to be reliably measurable. We will recognize the cost. When all of those criteria are met, then we will capitalize development expenditure. Development expenditure can continue for many years. Think about it. Development of a new phone, or say for example SpaceX mission March, it is continue for many years. Maybe it is continue from 2010. I do not know exact year. 2011, 2015, 2018, 2020, etc. At the very beginning, maybe they didn't have technical feasibility. They were just trying to do it. They did not believe that technically it is possible. They were experimenting. So in 2010, whatever money they spent, they cannot capitalize. Right. In 2012 also, maybe they were just experimenting. They did not have a commitment or intention to finish the project. Maybe from 2015, they have gained access to engineering things, financial things, other resources, etc. So from this day, all the criteria are met, and so we will say from 2015, whatever money you spent for this project will be capitalized as intangible asset. And before that, whatever you have spent, all those are expensed, loss. And those expenses cannot be recapitalized. Previously expensed expenditure cannot be recapitalized. So that's about development expenditure. Once again, research expenditure, if that is internal, cannot be capitalized. That must be charged as an expense in profit or loss. And development expenditure must be capitalized if certain criteria are met. Criteria, once again, technical feasibility, intention to complete, capability to complete. There will be future inflow of economic benefit. Cost is reliably measurable. Once again, technical feasibility, intention to complete, capability to complete. Then there will be future inflow of economic benefit, hopefully, and cost can be reliably measurable. When all the criteria are met, then we capitalize cost. Here we have a question, exam question. The requirement is explain how to account for the above expenditure. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 expenditure. You need to provide explanation for each one of those. After the acquisition of Barex, ProChain started developing its own sports clothing brand Pro. The expenditure in the period to 31st May 2006 was as follows. Now, 1 June 2005 to 31st August 2005, research as to the extent of the market, $3 million. Hasif Ahmed, what to do with that?
So it will not capitalize. It will directly charge in income statement.
Income statement. This is internal research expense. Now the second one, 1 September 2005 to 30 November 2005, prototype clothing and goods design. Robin, you tell me what to do with that.
Prototype. It's like prototype should be expense because it's not actually the final thing.
Masood?
So I think it should be capitalized, as you said that prototype or new model. Testing or prototype means that new model or something.
Right, this is sample product we are developing.
Sample.
Yes, sample product we are developing, so this should be capitalized. Masood, thank you very much for the correct answer. Then I will ask this question to Nahin. 1 December 2005 to 31st January 2006, employee costs in refinement of product. Means labor costs, say for example.
Yeah, I think this should be capitalized.
This should be capitalized. What do you mean by refinement of product?
As it was in development stage and they are still developing it.
Right. They are still developing the asset, developing the product, I would say. Refining the product, fine-tuning the product. Okay. Fine, thank you very much. Now next one I would ask to Nafiza. The development work, employee cost is done. Now 1 February 2006 to 30 April 2006, development work undertaken to finalize the design of product. Nafiza, you give me the answer. What to do with it?
I think it should capitalize.
It is clearly part of development work, so it will be capitalized. Thank you very much. Sonia, production and launch of the product, there is $6 million. Yes, the cost of production and launch of the products include the cost of upgrading existing machinery, $3 million. Sonia, tell me what to do with that. Should I capitalize this $3 million as intangible or not?
স্যার আমার কাছে মনে হচ্ছে যে এটা ক্যাপিটালাইজ করব না, কারণ এটা রিসার্চেও পড়ছেন, আমার যেটা মনে হচ্ছে স্যার, আর ডেভেলপমেন্টেও তো পড়ছেন, কারণ প্রোডাকশন এন্ড লঞ্চ।
Yeah, but we have a breakdown. Forget about production and launch. Forget about production and launch. We have a cost of upgrading existing machinery, $3 million. Focus on this line only. Yes, this is the breakdown. Now tell me, focusing just only on that line.
স্যার কোনটা আমি লাইনটা বুঝ মানে শুনতে পাইনি, কোন লাইনটার কথা বলছেন?
$3 million is spent for upgrading existing machinery.
The cost of the production launch product include the cost upgrading existing machinery. স্যার তাহলে তো এটা ক্যাপিটালাইজ করব, কারণ এটা মানে আমার এক্সিস্টিং মেশিনারি ডেভেলপমেন্টের, এটা তো ডেভেলপমেন্ট পার্টের ভিতরে পড়ছে।
Intangible asset? Is it intangible asset?
This production launch is the cost of building existing. Sir, I think so. Intangible asset.
Okay, intangible asset. Ah. No. This is not intangible asset, right? You need to understand the difference between apple and banana. This is machinery. Machinery means it is PPE. Property, plant and equipment. This is a tangible asset. The answer is right. $3 million must be capitalized. Capitalized, but not as intangible asset, but as PPE, tangible asset, machinery we are talking about. Be careful, yeah. Now the second section, market research cost $2 million and staff training cost $1 million. Tanvir, you tell me, should I capitalize those two? Market research 2 and staff training 1.
Straight off the bat, staff training costs, you can just knock that off the park because the training cost.
Okay.
The market research part is a little bit vague because the market is it additional market research after the development of the product has taken place to understand what is the sales feasibility.
Right. Like that.
Is it
it's like that.
Okay. So you're trying to analyze the market for prospective sales value for a product that you have already developed. It's not really going to give you any additional benefits from a perspective of the product itself. You're just doing research to understand how much sale you can get out of it. So I think the answer is no. So you can only recognize the $3 million as a tangible increase in tangible assets.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Asif. So Asif said market research cost $2 million cannot be capitalized. It is not part of development expenditure, obviously, and it is like research expenditure, internal research expenditure that cannot be capitalized. And employee training cost can also not be capitalized. Employees cannot be capitalized in the statement of financial position as intangible asset or tangible asset or biological asset. You cannot show human being as your asset, though they can bring some benefit in the future in your organization. That is prohibited or restricted. Thank you very much. So we had 6 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items for 6 marks. Very easy. Most of the items you can answer easily, but some of you had little bit confusion here and there, like prototype. One person gave me wrong answer. And be careful, machinery, that is PPE. Yes, you can score easy marks by putting some attention, or you can lose easy marks by not putting the attention. So put attention. Now next we will talk about measurement of intangible asset. First, initial measurement of intangible asset. Initially, intangible asset will be measured as at cost, as like property, plant and equipment, if you know that. And we have a breakdown of cost, like acquisition cost or purchase cost of intangible asset. If you develop the intangible asset, then direct cost of development of intangible asset. In IAS 16, we have learned that the purchase cost should be net of trade discount. So same thing is applicable over here. We didn't write the additional details, but it is like the same. Legal fee, professional fee, that would be capitalized. Like if you need to register it, that needs to be capitalized, or if you need to pay some broker fee, that needs to be capitalized. Development overhead, there is salary of the programmers for development of a software, and there will be some people who will oversee test the software, those are overhead. Or electricity bill, computer depreciation, those are overhead, indirect expenditure, but necessary for the development. Like computer depreciation, which are used by the programmers to develop the software. Import duty, if you are purchasing the software or intangible asset from outside of the country. First time testing cost, as like IAS 16, net of revenue generated or income generated in the testing period. Borrowing cost can be capitalized under IAS 23. We will discuss about IAS 23 another day, not today. Now, sometimes some asset may have zero cost. When asset has zero cost, when you receive an asset under a grant, government grant, say for example, okay, you are receiving it for free from the government, so zero cost. Initially, we have learned we need to capitalize the cost. How much is cost? Cost is zero. So if you show it at zero value, it is not relevant for the user's decision making, number one, and number two, it is meaningless to show something at zero value. So what should be the value of that intangible asset? This time we can make some exception, like we can recognize that intangible asset at fair value. Similarly, the government grant or income or deferred income, whatever is appropriate, also should be recognized at fair value. When you are recognizing the asset at fair value. Why you are recognizing the asset at fair value? Because the cost is zero. That is your excuse. Subsequent measurement of intangible asset. Come over here. After initial recognition, as like IAS 16, we have two models, cost model and revaluation / fair value model. Some calls it revaluation model, some calls it fair value model. We are not bothered about that actually. Now, fair value model for IAS 16 is very good and appreciated, but fair value model for IAS 38 is not appreciated. We have additional condition to measure an intangible asset at fair value under IAS 38. We must have to have an active market for the assets, say for example for the software, so that we can determine the fair value of the asset on an ongoing basis. If we do not have an active market, then fair value model or revaluation model for the asset will not be appropriate. So intangible assets are rarely revalued. Remember that. Intangible assets are rarely revalued. Mostly historical cost method is used for intangible assets. Now, as like IAS 16, if you elect to apply revaluation model, then you need to revalue your asset with sufficient frequency to avoid significant difference between the carrying value and fair value. For example, market value is $20 million and carrying value is $2 million. This kind of situation is not acceptable. Not acceptable situation. There is a significant difference between market value and carrying value. Whenever you see that, you understand that this is a time to revalue my intangible asset. Now next, revaluation should be carried out for the whole class of asset. Same as IAS 16, right? You revalue one asset in isolation and another asset belonging to the same class, you use historical cost model. It is not acceptable. Intangible assets that are internally generated and that are not permitted for capitalization if internally generated should also not be revalued. Okay. So internally, those assets that cannot be capitalized if internally generated should not be revalued. Like goodwill should not be revalued. It is not permitted that you revalue goodwill. Similarly, it is not permitted that you revalue your brand, etc. Now we will talk about two different categories of intangible assets. Those are finite life intangible asset and indefinite life intangible asset. First, finite life intangible asset means an intangible asset for which we can make reliable estimation of the useful life. Useful life can be reliably estimated, like 10 years license. That's a finite life intangible asset. However, there are some intangible assets for which it is very difficult to estimate the useful life. If we cannot estimate the useful life, then that is called indefinite life intangible asset. We need to understand indefinite does not mean infinite. Infinite means it will never end, and indefinite simply means we cannot define, we don't know. Okay, it's not infinite, it is indefinite, we cannot define. Example, goodwill. How long goodwill will last of the organization? We cannot reliably estimate. Goodwill is very volatile. It can be damaged by a single event. A single bad event can damage your reputation of your company, right? A single plane accident can damage goodwill of airline business. It's like that. Now, if you cannot determine your useful life for the intangible asset, then you need to explain why you cannot define the useful life, and every single year you need to review whether now you can identify or define useful life or not. Next year again you will review whether now you can find out the useful life, estimate the useful life of that asset or not. That means this exercise needs to be done every single year, and you also need to explain in note why you cannot estimate useful life of this asset. So come over here. Validity of the assumption for indefinite life asset means you cannot define the useful life, needs to be reviewed annually, every single year. Also, you need to explain this in notes. So we have two classes of intangible asset, two different types of intangible asset, better to say, finite life and indefinite life. Finite life intangible assets will be amortized over the useful life. As like IAS 16 property, plant and equipment, we can apply a straight line basis, we can apply a reducing balance basis, but if we are unsure about the pattern, then we should go for a straight line basis. Depreciable amount should be amortized, and depreciable amount equals to cost less residual value. This asset should be impairment tested if there is an indication of impairment. Otherwise, impairment test is not necessary. What about indefinite life intangible asset? Those indefinite life intangible assets cannot be amortized. Why is that? Because we do not know how many years it will last. So these assets must be impairment tested every single year. Whether or not there is indication, it doesn't matter. Every single year, impairment test is necessary for indefinite life intangible asset. This one is irrespective of indication. of impairment. You must do it. So every year at the same time, you need to do it. At the same time. It is not necessary that you do impairment test at the year end. You can do it, you can make a policy to do it in the middle of the year also, like 31st March, every year 31st March, you do the impairment test. Very good, no problem. It's not necessary that you do it at the year end. And sometimes you need multiple impairment tests for an asset. Multiple test for an asset over a year. Test means impairment test. If there are multiple indications of impairment, indication of impairment. Remember that. You have done impairment test in March, and by September you got another indication of impairment. Now you need to carry out impairment review once again. If you get 5 indications in 5 different months, you need to carry out 5 impairment tests in a single year. Now for this indefinite life intangible asset, you are doing impairment test once in a year in the month of March. But after that, if you get an indication of impairment, you must do another impairment test. Okay. Whenever you get indication, you must do impairment test. Whether this is finite life or indefinite life, it doesn't matter. So we put it over there. Next, we will talk about residual value. Under IAS 16, we have defined what is residual value. That is the NRV that you expect from selling the asset today in an active market. If the asset is in old condition, end of the useful life condition, that is residual value. For intangible asset, normal assumption of residual value is that it is 0. This is very normal to assume 0 residual value. However, you have the freedom to assume some other residual value, but in that case you need to establish that there is an active market for the intangible asset, and that active market will exist at the end of the useful life of the asset. Otherwise, go for 0 residual value assumption. That is the normal assumption for intangible asset.
Okay,
yeah.
example.
Like you have purchased a software. What is the residual value? Close your eyes and say 0. Okay.
Right. But what about an example where a residual value exists?
Residual. This is actually very rare. Residual value exists for residual value exists for intangible asset, because we do not see active market for any intangible asset unless it is a software games. That's the only example, okay, of active market for sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, tell me, Tanvir. Tanvir, come on. So we are saying that we do not see example of active market for any intangible asset other than like software, games, etc. And software, obsolete softwares are sold. We have like very few examples of that. that obsolete softwares are sold that are very old, like maybe Windows 98, Windows 7 they are still selling Windows 7 at some price. And after the useful life, it still exists, active market. This example is very rare. Maybe they will take like $1, $2 for that license. Most of the time they just distribute it for free. But if we have that kind of example, in that case we will take some residual value. Otherwise, go for 0 residual value. That is default. 0 residual value is default. And easy also. Who needs to take this pain? Now, amortization of a finite life intangible asset, similar to IAS 16, is start amortization when the asset is ready for use. And only the depreciable amount should be amortized. If you ask me how much is depreciable amount, that is equals to cost or value less residual value. For intangible asset, it is our normal assumption that residual value is 0. As like IAS 16, amortize over the useful life. Amortization period means useful life should be reviewed at least annually. Not only that, other estimations also should be reviewed at least annually. We also need to estimate amortization pattern, and amortization should match that estimated pattern. You can estimate a straight line, you can estimate reducing balance, but if you are confused, close your eyes and go for a straight line method. That is the default method, no problem at all. You do not need to estimate the pattern in that case. And this is your journal: amortization debit, accumulated amortization credit. Amortization is an expense that goes into profit or loss account. Subsequent expenditure on intangible asset. As like IAS 16, we can have two different types of subsequent expenditure: revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditures definitely are expensed through profit or loss, and capital expenditures will be capitalized, so assets value will increase. Capital expenditure will improve capacity of an asset. As a result, the asset will improve, and as a result, we can expect more inflow of economic benefit from the asset. However, it is difficult for intangible asset. For most type of intangible asset, it is very difficult to find out proper capital expenditure. So due to the nature of intangible asset, it is highly unlikely that subsequent expenditure will meet the criteria of capitalization. But sometimes it definitely meets the criteria of capitalization, and definitely we capitalize subsequent expenditure, especially if we talk about a software, games. If we launch a new version of games, then we capitalize that, of course. That is capital expenditure, and we can clearly establish that the asset is improved because of the new version, launching of new version. Sometimes because of significant expansion pack, the software can improve and more benefit can come to the entity. New customers will be created. Now, derecognition of intangible assets. Intangible assets should be derecognized on disposal, or if a situation arises when you expect no future inflow of economic benefit from the use of the asset or from the sale or disposal of the asset. In that case, it should be directly derecognized. You have a license of a software, but it is so obsolete, neither you are using it and nor you have the right to sell it to someone else for money. So you just derecognize it. Or even if you have the right to transfer it, you are receiving nothing out of that transaction. Now we will talk about some of the disclosures. First disclosure is useful life. Disclose that. Or sometimes for reducing balance basis, we use a rate, 10% reducing balance basis, say for example, amortization rate. Amortization method should be disclosed, like a straight line or reducing balance, gross carrying amount and accumulated amortization, and then carrying value also should be disclosed. And that is gross carrying amount minus accumulated amortization. Similarly, if the asset is impaired, then the amount of impairment loss, accumulated amount of impairment loss, should also be disclosed in the note. In which line item that intangible assets, amortization, impairment, etc. are shown, that should be disclosed in the note. Is it in the admin expense or is it in the COGS, etc.? And we need to provide a full calculation from the opening to the closing. Opening to closing. Whatever happened, like addition, disposal, retirement, revaluation, impairment, reversal of impairment, amortization, exchange gain loss, whatever happened, we need to provide full calculation. Additional disclosure, basis for determining that an intangible asset has indefinite useful life. Why it has indefinite useful life? You need to explain that. Why you cannot measure the life of that asset. Okay, and every single year you need to review whether now you can measure the useful life or not, or estimate the useful life or not. Description and carrying amount of individually material intangible assets. We have a big license, or we have a big, very expensive ERP software, individually material intangible asset, etc. Disclosures about intangible assets acquired by the way of government grant. Sometimes you can acquire an intangible asset from the government at zero cost. Provide a special disclosure for that. Development expenditure. If you have development expenditure, provide disclosure regarding that, whether those meet the criteria of capitalization or not. Explain how those meet the criteria of capitalization. When previously capitalized development expenditure no longer meet the criteria, explain why it met the criteria before and not meet the criteria right now. Provide the explanation, otherwise confusion will be created. So those are the basic disclosures. Now we will move on to some practice questions. This is our first practice question. Discuss how the above issue should be dealt by a Scramble for its financial statements. At 30 November 2001, 65%, that is significant, of Scramble's total assets were mainly represented by internally generated, developed, or generated intangible assets, comprising the capitalized costs of the development and production of online computer games. These games generate all of Scramble's revenue. The costs incurred in relation to maintaining the games at the same standard of performance are expensed to profit or loss for the year. The accounting policy note states that intangible assets are valued at historical cost. Scramble considers that games to have an indefinite useful life, which is reconsidered annually when the intangible assets are tested for impairment. So you will have, for this kind of question, 5 to 6 marks for discussion of this. 5 to 6 marks. This is a small paragraph, so maybe you will have 5 marks. Now, my first question, I'm asking from Priti. You give me the answer. These are internally developed intangible assets, games. Do they have right to capitalize it or not? Can they capitalize it in compliance with IFRS? Tasnim, internally developed. Whether capitalization of these games are okay or not. Tasnim, you absent? Asif, you tell me.
Internally generated video games which produces 100% of the entity's revenue.
Right.
Just thinking about it.
So,
Can we change here?
can be capitalized or not?
Well, if you think about, so this is their main product, right?
Yes.
But they obviously have to go through the research and the development phase prior to releasing those products as a product in order to generate economic revenue. So obviously, at the first instance, if you go back in time, they would have the right to recognize those assets after the development stage and the completion stage of the video games by law to be able to recognize them as assets. Okay. So in that regard, yes. Prior to the launching, they would have had to do development and research. Research they have expensed, development they have capitalized to get to the final finished product.
Okay.
And yeah, fair enough. That makes sense.
Okay, a little bit. Sonia, can you tell me regarding that?
Sir, আমরা normally internally generated আপনার অ্যাসেটকে হিসেবে চার্জ ইন্টেনজিবল অ্যাসেট হিসেবে চার্জ করে যদি ওখানে বেসটা রিজনেবল অ্যান্ড সাপোর্টেড থাকে। তো এইখানে আমার যেটা মনে হচ্ছে স্যার, এখানে ক্যাপিটালাইজেশন ডেভেলপমেন্ট প্রোডাকশন অনলাইন কম্পিউটার গেম এটাতে মনে হচ্ছে যে এটা রিজনেবল এটা ক্যাপিটালাইজ করতে পারবে।
Okay. Okay, guys. So you guys are talking about reasonableness, but we do not need that reasonableness thing. We need to focus on something else. It doesn't matter whether those are internally generated or not. We do not have any problem with computer games, whether those are internally generated or externally acquired. We can capitalize it. Okay. If we acquire the code of the game, if we say like that. Now, for development expenditure, there are certain criteria which must be met for the capitalization of development expenditure, and it is apparent that those criteria are met. Those games generate revenue, there are successful games. Okay, so definitely there is technical feasibility, intention to complete, capability to complete, inflow of economic benefit. We do not need to give them all those points, but it is very apparent that the criteria of capitalization for development expenditure are met. And internally developed, it is not a problem at all for capitalization of development expenditure. Criteria are met means it must be capitalized. Okay. Production cost, you can argue about that, but development cost of the software should be capitalized. Development cost, yes. This should be capitalized.
স্যার, তাহলে এখানে আমি ইন্টারনালি যে ডেভেলপারের বিষয়টা আছে এই জিনিসটা আমরা ফোকাস করব না এরকম সিচুয়েশন আসলে। সেই ক্ষেত্রে কি স্যার আমি জাস্ট দেখবো যে ডেভেলপমেন্টের ইয়েগুলো ক্রাইটেরিয়াগুলো মিট করছে কিনা?
Yes, development expenditure. But there are certain items for which you need to check whether this is internally generated or not, like goodwill, brand, etc. If those are internal things, research. If those are internal things, then cannot be capitalized. But development expenditure, internal development expenditure, fine. Criteria are met means capitalizable. There is a first part. Well, now the second part, let me highlight. The costs incurred in relation to maintaining the games at the same standard of performance are expensed to profit or loss. Cost incurred in relation to maintaining the games at same standard are expensed to profit or loss for the year. Means subsequent expenditure. Nafiza, you tell me whether this treatment is correct or not. You accept it or reject it. Why do you accept or reject? Nafiza. Nafiza. Yes. We are
normally to maintain cost, profit and loss. Yeah.
Right. So do you take it maintenance cost? Yes. Explain it.
হ্যাঁ স্যার আমার মনে হচ্ছে তো স্ট্যান্ডার্ড সেম স্ট্যান্ডার্ড রাখার জন্য কস্ট ইনকার হচ্ছে
Thank you very much.
মেইনটেইন করা
Thank you very much. You picked the right word from the question. Same standard. That means this is maintenance cost. This is revenue expenditure. And this should be expensed through profit or loss. And they are doing the right thing. Thank you very much. Now the next part, the accounting policy note states that intangible assets are valued at historical cost. So I'm not asking this question, but we have two models, historical cost model and revaluation model. Nahin, you tell me, this is obviously appropriate, you can use historical cost. Nahin, you tell me when revaluation model can be used for intangible asset.
If there is an active market.
Thank you very much.
Identify.
To provide us fair value on an ongoing basis. Only then revaluation model can be used, and this is rare for intangible assets to have active market, and so for most of the assets historical cost model will be more appropriate, and they're doing more appropriate thing. We don't have any complaint about that. Now Scramble considers the games to have an indefinite useful life, which is reconsidered annually when the intangible assets are tested for impairment. Mubarak Hussain, can you tell me what are the consequences if you consider that the asset is indefinite life?
সেক্ষেত্রে ইনডেফিনিট লাইফের ক্ষেত্রে তো ইম্পায়ারমেন্ট চার্জ করতে পারবে না, সেক্ষেত্রে ফেয়ার ভ্যালু সরি অ্যামর্টাইজেশন চার্জ করতে পারবে না, সেক্ষেত্রে অ্যানুয়ালি হচ্ছে
Right. The asset cannot be amortized because of absence of useful life, but annual impairment test is necessary, right? And also every single year, what do you need to do?
আর যেটা করতে
Okay, maybe you are having some network problem, right? Every single year, what do you need to do?
Hello?
Yes, we are hearing you. Every single year, you need to recheck whether you can measure the life of the asset or estimate the life of the asset now or not. And also you must disclose why you cannot measure the useful life of the asset. What are the problem? You need to disclose that. So that was our first question. Now we will move on to our second question. This is from 2011. Scramble wished to diversify its operation and purchased a professional football club like Barcelona. But here the football club has a name, Rashing. In Rashing's financial statements for the year ended 30 November 2001, it was proposed to include significant intangible assets. Significant intangible assets which related to acquired players' registration rights. Acquired players' registration rights. Comprising registration and agents' fees. The agents' fees were paid by the club for players' agents either when a player is transferred to the club or when the contract of a player is extended. Scramble believes that the registration right of the player are intangible asset. This is the belief of Scramble. But the agent's fee do not meet the criteria to be recognized as intangible asset, as they are not directly attributable to the cost of player's contract. So this is the belief of a Scramble. Now we need to discuss again. So there are two issues over here. A contract between Rashing and maybe Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi. Whether that contract can be recognized as intangible asset or not. Masood Bhuiya. The contract with player registration right. Can we take it as an intangible asset? You need to pay several $1 million to make a contract with Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. Masood. Masood Bhuiya. Masood Bhuiya, yeah. Come on.
Sorry, what was your questions?
My question is, Rashing has contract with Cristiano Ronaldo, right? This is a football club, right? You understand the nature of industry? Whether
yes, sir.
That contract can be recognized as an intangible asset or not. The contract is formed by spending several $1 million. Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi is transferred to Rashing from another club, and Rashing had to pay a big amount of money to make the contract.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it can be capitalized.
It can be capitalized. Now, there are few criteria of capitalization. The first criteria is separately identifiable.
Yes.
Can you tell me how it is separately
identifiable? Can you hear
identifiable?
me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Clear. How is it separately identifiable?
Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Clear. I can hear you.
Sir.
Yes, tell me. I can hear you.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
There's some technical problem in my laptop.
Okay, sure. I can hear. You cannot hear me? Oh, someone muted me. Sorry. Please, guys, do not mute me, okay? Do not mute me.
How could someone mute you, sir?
I don't know.
Can you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Masood Bhuiya, Yes, I was asking a question to Masood Bhuiya. Masood Bhuiya is right that the player registration right should be considered as an intangible asset, valuable intangible asset. Now, intangible asset recognition has some criteria. Intangible asset is a separately identifiable item, right? Masood Bhuiya, can you tell me what does it mean separately identifiable and how it is separately identifiable? Masood Bhuiya, how is it separately identifiable?
Sir, a contract is already made between the club Rashing and the CR7 or Messi. Right. So this is measurable.
That's not the point. For separately identifiable, the intangible asset needs to be separately purchased or you are able to separately sell, or you are able to separately transfer, or you are able to separately lease it out, or you have obtained it under a contractual or legal right, then the intangible asset is considered as separately identifiable. Those are the points, right? From those points you need to pick one point. Like you could pick a separate legal or contractual agreement is made with CR7, so this is definitely separately identifiable. Separately identifiable. Yes?
Yes.
Now my next question: in order to fulfill recognition criteria, there must be future inflow of economic benefit.
Right, sir.
What kind of inflow of economic benefit Rashing will get by making a contract with CR7?
So their brand value will be increased.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Any other example?
So they will get a lot of sponsor.
Lot of sponsor. Awesome. More ticket
Yes.
sales. Yes.
Right.
Very good. Perfect understanding. You can put it in your answer. And so this is separately identifiable thing, which will bring future inflow of economic benefit to the entity. An entity also will have control over CR7 or Messi because of the contract. So these are intangible assets for the entity. Now I will move on to Maqsudur Robin for the next part of the question.
Okay.
When Rashing make a contract with a player, there is a third party agent involved. Like they will pay 20 million to Messi, and agent will take like $0.2 million from there. So Scramble argues that the agent's fees do not meet the criteria of capitalization. So Scramble is saying we will not capitalize that $0.2 million. Okay, that's their argument. And let me provide you the background. The agent's fees were paid by the club to the player's agents either when a player is transferred to the club,
Okay.
or when the contract of a player is extended. This is the context of paying the agent's fee. Now tell me whether it should be capitalized as intangible asset, or should we ignore it, put it in profit or loss?
আমি মনে করি ক্যাপিটালাইজ হওয়া উচিত, কারণ আমি তো নিশ্চিত হয়ে নিচ্ছি প্লেয়ারটাকে যে আমি প্লেয়ারকে নিব, তখনই আমাকে এজেন্ট বা ব্রোকার চার্জ করতেছে।
Right. That's very good. Your understanding is correct. And when we acquire an intangible asset, we need to recognize it at cost, and that cost also include direct cost, like professional fee, legal fee, custom duty, etc. And this is a professional fee that you need to pay to acquire the registration contract and to extend it. In both cases, you are having some additional asset. Extension means additional asset will be created. Yes. And acquisition, that means additional asset will be created. Thank you very much for your answer. Very good understanding. Now you need to practice a little bit writing. Now our next question is log fine from 2011. Same requirement, discuss type of requirement. We have 6 marks. So there will be more than one issues, of course, and you need to discuss with those issues. Log fine has internally developed intangible assets comprising the capitalized expenses of the acquisition and production of electronic map. Internally developed electronic map. This is not Goodwill brand, so we don't have any problem with electronic map. This is kind of software type of thing. Electronic map data, which indicates the main fishing grounds in the world. The intangible assets generate revenue for the company in their use by the fishing fleet. Generate revenue. and are a material asset in the statement of financial position. This far. We will just read this far, not the whole question. And then I will ask Hasib Ahmed. Is it okay to capitalize this electronic map data, something like that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. So it should be capitalized, though it is internal generated. It is not a matter, but it should be capitalized.
Because
this is revenue generating revenue for the company. That's why.
So development expenditure has a few criteria, and it is apparent that those criteria are fulfilled. Like it is already generating revenue, it has a use, it can locate fishing area, etc. Okay, it is finished already, used already, so criteria fulfilled. Thank you very much. That is good understanding. Now the second part of the question, Lockfine had constructed a database of the electronic maps. The costs incurred in bringing the information about a certain region of the world to a higher standard of performance are capitalized. The costs related to maintaining the information about a certain region at the same standard of performance are expensed. This is the second issue you need to identify. 6 marks, you need to identify several issues. Baki Billah, this is your issue. Tell me. Okay or not? Yes, we are hearing you. Baki Billah. Turn on the microphone again. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
The cost incurred in bringing the information about a certain region of the world to a higher standard of performance are capitalized. The costs related to maintaining the information about a certain region at the same standard of performance are expensed. So this is so the updated one is capitalized, which is correct. Because it is going to generate. It has developed the current asset.
Right.
Not the current asset, but the asset actually.
Right.
Whereas the one which is used for maintaining it is expense, which is also correct because this is not improving the asset.
Right.
So the issue is there is no issue in this part. If I'm not wrong.
Right. You are correct. The first one, we are taking the asset to a higher standard. So asset is improving. We are expecting more inflow of economic benefit. So capitalization is correct. Though IAS 38 says that subsequent expenditure may rarely meet the criteria of capitalization, but in this case, it is apparent that we are getting higher standard. So capitalization is correct. And the second part, maintaining at the same level, that is revenue expenditure. Your explanation is perfect, no problem. Now the next part, Lockfine's accounting policy states that intangible assets are valued at historical cost. Well, you need to give a line about that. This is basically the preferable method for intangible asset because rarely active market exists for intangible asset to provide us fair value on an ongoing basis. So it's good, no problem. The company considers the database to have an indefinite useful life, which is reconsidered annually when it is tested for impairment. Indefinite useful life. Now, who will give me the answer? Preeti, you are there. Tasneem. I don't know what Tasneem is doing today. Bakibila, you give me the answer. What are the consequences of considering an intangible asset of having indefinite life?
We need to reconsider that every year we have to check whether that we can find the lifetime or not.
Very good.
Yearly check that, and if it is not, we'll keep it. And if we can find a definite life for that, then we need to depreciate accordingly.
Right. Very good. And anything else?
And
impairment test every year because we cannot amortize.
Yes.
That's the second thing.
Yeah.
And number 3, disclosure. Why we cannot estimate the estimate the life of the asset? We need to disclose that. What's the reason? What is the difficulty, etc. So remember the consequence of determining indefinite life. Now next one, the reasons supporting the assessment of an indefinite useful life were not disclosed. The reason supporting the assessment why indefinite life is not disclosed in the financial statements, and neither did the company disclose how it classified the criteria for recognizing an intangible asset arising from development. So maybe you will have another 1 or 2 marks for this section. We have identified 3-4 issues, maybe 2 marks from this section. Who will give me answer? Disclosure, whether that is good or bad, what disclosure is required? Just like that.
Disclosure is required because that this is having an indefinite useful life, and for indefinite useful life you need to give the disclosure about that why this is having indefinite useful life, and every year we need to impairment this asset as we are cannot doing the amortization. And besides that, as we are developing this asset, we need to give the disclosure about the further development, like the subsequent expenditure we have made for this equipment.
Not only that, capitalization criteria must be disclosed. Like
I think
there are certain capitalization criteria. Yes, Robin, you tell me.
Yeah, I was wondering, like fishing grounds তো মানে ফিক্সড কিছু না, আজকে যেটা ফিশিং গ্রাউন্ড 5 বছর পরে তো সেটা ফিশিং গ্রাউন্ড নাও থাকতে পারে, সো এটা ইনডেফিনিট ভাবে হয়তোবা ডেফিনিটও কিছু থাকতে পারে।
Right. So every year reassessment is necessary. If we cannot estimate today, then tomorrow we need to reassess. And indefinite life doesn't mean infinite life. It just means we cannot estimate. We don't know. Of course, life is finite, but we don't know. And regarding the criteria, there are few criteria which must be met in order to capitalize development expenditure. How those criteria are met, that must be disclosed in the note. Okay. So Lockfine is not making this disclosure, means Lockfine's financial statements will not comply with IAS 38. That's the problem. So ChemClean, this is going to be our last exercise for today's class. This is from 2015 exam question. Come on. 2015. ChemClean trades in chemical industry. You got that? The entity has development and production operations in various countries. It has entered into an agreement with Joe Master, under which ChemClean will license Joe Master's know-how and technology to manufacture a chemical compound, volute. I will take the license. Technology belongs to Joe Master. Because of the license, I can manufacture volute. Right, this is a technology or know-how and technology. The know-how and technology has a fair value of $4 million. ChemClean cannot use the know-how and technology for manufacturing any other compound than volute. So it only can be used for volute. ChemClean has not concluded that economic benefits are likely to flow from this compound to ChemClean. The inflow of economic benefit is not yet concluded whether we will have inflow of economic benefit or not. but will use Joe Masters technology for a period of 3 years. ChemClean will have to keep updating the technology in accordance with Joe Masters' requirement. The agreement stipulates that ChemClean will make a non-refundable payment of $4 million to Joe Master for access to the technology. Fine. That's the issue. When we discuss this, first of all, we need to discuss whether this can be recorded as an intangible asset by ChemClean or not. Okay, so maybe Masood Bhuiya?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So it can be considered as intangible asset as it is initially measured as cost, that is 4 million.
4 million cost is reliably measurable.
Right, sir.
It can be separately identifiable.
Separately identifiable. Right.
Entity will have control or not? Tell me.
Yes, sir. Entity have control.
What control? Entity can direct the use of the asset. Right? Now,
Right.
one point is given in the question that you cannot manufacture anything other than volute. Is it a compromise of control? Is it a compromise of control?
Yes.
Or not?
Yes, sir.
No, it's not a compromise of control. It's not a compromise of control. Right. Control doesn't mean you need to be able to do all the things of the world. License can be given for a specific things. If you can do the specific thing, that is enough, good enough. Right. Once one license does not cover everything in the world, every chemical compound in the world. That's not how license operates. It's not a compromise of control. Remember that, okay?
Okay.
Is there future inflow of economic benefit? The answer is what?
No.
It is not
Uncertain.
concluded. Uncertain. Now, is it a failure of the recognition criteria or not?
Sir, I can separately measure this figure,
Right.
and cost is measured
4 million.
and 4 million. So that's why I think it's I can consider it as an intangible asset.
So those criteria are met, but there is another criteria, that is future inflow of economic benefit, which is uncertain. Yes. Now,
although it is uncertain, but it's not certain that my future economic benefit will not flow. So that's why.
Okay.
So,
now, that's actually not the way of answering this question. The way of answering this question is this inflow of economic benefit. This test is not necessary for acquired intangible asset. This test is only necessary for internally developed intangible asset. Remember, this test, inflow of economic benefit test, is only necessary for internally developed intangible asset. We must have to have reasonable and supportable assumptions regarding conditions of the internally generated intangible asset existing over the life of internally generated intangible asset. For acquired intangible assets, we simply assume that this criteria of inflow of economic benefit is fulfilled, and that's why we are acquiring this intangible asset. This is simply assumed, so that uncertainty is not compromising recognition criteria, because this is not a recognition criteria for acquired intangible asset at all in the first place. We got that right? So it will be capitalized. Now, someone else, Mubarak Hussain. We need to update based on Joe Master's requirement. Based on Joe Master's requirement, ChemClean will have to keep updating the technology in accordance with Joe Master's requirement, whether we should capitalize those updating costs or not.
ক্যাপিটালাইজ করা তো উচিত, কারণ আপডেট করার কথা বলছি, মানে আপডেটিং মেইনটেনেন্স তো
বলে নাই, আপগ্রেড বলেছে। সো ক্যাপিটালাইজ করা উচিত, দ্যাটস ইউর কনক্লুশন। বাট সেই সাথে আমাদের এটাও পুট করতে হবে, IAS 38 says that this very rarely subsequent expenditure will meet the criteria of capitalization. We need to establish that the asset will improve, and as a result we will receive more inflow of economic benefit. At this moment we do not have any reasonable supportable evidence to show whether there will be more inflow of economic benefit or not. Whether Joe Master will receive the benefit or ChemClean will receive the benefit, we do not know that. Of course someone will receive the benefit because it's upgrade. So we will leave it over there. Normally upgrade cost is capitalized, but IAS 38 says rarely it will meet the condition of capitalization. There will be a little bit uncertainty regarding that. Okay, Mubarak Hussain, good answer. Now Rusho, Joe Master will also receive a 10% royalty from sales of chemical compound. Means ChemClean will sell the chemical compound and Joe Master will receive 10% royalty. Now what is this? ChemClean will pay 10% from the sales.
I think this sales is not part of the license.
Thank you very
agreement,
much.
so this
Or license
10% will
value,
be
license
expensed.
asset. It's part of license agreement, but
value,
it's
yeah.
not part of intangible asset. It should be regular operating expense. When we generate revenue, we should recognize the revenue and also the operating expense. Yeah. Okay. Your baby, how old is your baby? Boy or girl, Rusho?
16 months.
16 months. Oh, boy or girl?
Girl.
Okay, nice. May Allah bless her. Now we have one more question over there, just one more. Okay. Here the question is, ChemClean is interested in another compound. The name of the compound is Yacton. Okay, that's the compound which is being developed by Joe Master. The compound is in the second phase of development. The intellectual property of compound Yacton has been put into a newly formed shell company. The name of the shell company is CoNew, which has no employees. The compound is the only asset of CoNew. CoNew is a company, registered company. ChemClean is intending to acquire 65% interest in CoNew, which will give it control over the entity and the compound. ChemClean will provide the necessary resources to develop the compound. Now here we have a little bit issue. This will be like 3-4 marks question. Nafiza, CoNew, it's a legally registered entity. What an accountant will say about this CoNew? A lawyer will say, okay, it's a government registered with government, right? RJSC. As an accountant, what do you have to say about this entity CoNew? Nafiza. Nafiza. Nafiza.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So the company, there is no the company does not exist in actual. It has only, it only legally exists by papers because it does not have any employees or any asset. The only thing they have is the product Yakton.
One asset, one intangible
One,
asset. Huh?
one intangible, that is Yakton.
Yes.
So, sir, I don't think that this is going to. I don't know, but how is it possible to invest in a company, or would it be right to invest in such company where there is nothing but intangible asset?
Yeah, that is a
So, and
business
it is
decision, not accounting decision, right? That is a business decision.
Yes.
Hmm.
But the company is, controlled by ChemClean.
Yes,
So
company will be
65%.
controlled by
So-
ChemClean. Yeah,
So they are the main controller of the company.
company, right.
Though the title is Conyu, but control belongs to ChemClean.
ChemClean. So Conyu will be a subsidiary of ChemClean. Maksudur Rabin, you were saying that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because they have acquired 65%, more than 50%.
Okay. But I want to say, like, yes, if you are a lawyer, there is no problem with that, legally registered company. Who can deny the existence of the company if it is a legally registered company? Legally, it's 100% a company, and legally, it is 100% a subsidiary of ChemClean. But what an accountant says, accountant deals with substance over form. Accountant doesn't care about legal form that much. Rather, commercial substance, that's what accountant cares about. And when accountant looks at the commercial substance, an accountant will say, no, I don't want to recognize this as a company. I don't want to recognize this as a subsidiary because it doesn't have any employee. It doesn't have any other asset. It doesn't have any organization. It doesn't have any revenue stream. It doesn't have any input, process, output. It has only one intangible asset. So what kind of business is it? It's not a business from an accountant's point of view. Of course, it's an asset. It's an asset. There is an asset, right? What asset? Yakton technology is there. Yakton technology is there. So an accountant will say, based on substance over form, we will not recognize this as a business or company or subsidiary. Rather, we will say we have acquired 65% of an intangible asset. Let's record that in our statement of financial position and other statements. Okay. Did you understand? Got my point? Baki Billah, Maksudur Rabin? Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
That's your substance over form.
I got only a few percentages, but now I'm more clear.
You are more clear? Yes. Yeah. So guys, that was about IAS 38. Go home and of course review the whole lecture, watch the video multiple times and write the answers. We have discussed it. Review that and write the answers. Any question, any feedback? No? Then, so guys, say good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Take care, everyone. Good night. I love you.
Good night.